And you're listening to A Little Too Quiet. It is the Ferndale Library podcast brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. I'm Jeff Milo, and Rodi Brown is here again.
Hi.
And Mary Grahame is here again.
Hello.
And we're here talking about books. What else would we be talking about on a library podcast? But we're talking about owning books, and we're going to be talking about our own personal collection. And it was another epic talk. It's always a pleasure to talk to both of you.
Of course, you got a little smidgen of Pride and Prejudice right at the beginning too. So
we're keeping it.
Yes, we
consistent.
Well, when we first got into the booth today, as Mary Grahame and Rodi are wont to do, they will just start talking about books, whether the red button is pushed or not. And we got off on tangents that involved Rachel Weisz and The Music Man, and you'll be probably hearing more about that later. And then we got into, eventually, Pride and Prejudice. We're here to talk about, yes, we work in a library. We have access to free books all day long. Do we still buy books? The answer, of course, is yes. But we covered a lot here today. And it was such an organic stream of conscious. So I'm excited for you to listen to this episode. Thanks for tuning in.
Because his servants like him.
Because he's so well liked.
And he manages his land well.
He does.
Right.
Okay. Are we officially recording?
We are officially, but I don't want you to... Because you guys are so good. You guys can go forever on so many subjects. It's like, as the journalist in the room, I can't resist capturing this great
Also,
content.
It's such a good house.
Yes.
Kimberly is a great house. And
If you're just tuning in, we're talking about Darcy's house.
I just have a lot of feelings about the houses in Pride and Prejudice. I know that is so random, but like the houses and the gardens, I could talk about them forever. Okay? Because an entire lifetime happens while someo's taking a walk through the garden, essentially.
Sure.
So true love happens. To be
there's
clear.
this shot from the 95 adaptation that's straight out of the book, and it's after like Darcy and Elizabeth have like finally confessed, one word from you will silence me forever, but then she's like, no, keep talking. And the camera pans out and you see like one of the younger sisters walking in front of them. Like, because that's how it is in the book. It's like, oh, like even private stuff isn't private in this world.
Yeah. Also, one word from you will silence me forever is an energy that I need more people to have.
Especially more men.
Agreed.
Sorry.
Agreed.
To be clear.
Agreed.
Yes.
Do you know what my transition is?
I'm dying to know.
Pride and Prejudice is in my home library. I own possibly 2 copies. So
that's a correct number of copies to own.
Where we will begin our chat about what we own at home.
Oh my goodness. So, well, I guess I'm gonna.
This is a safe space. This is a safe space. You can cry.
So Jeff knows this story, but now you and I guess the listeners will also know. So remember how I got the sort of leftover bookshelf?
Yes,
from
because
here?
you beat me out for it.
Okay, there was.
I did not realize there was.
No, it's okay. It was like a random drawing, and it's totally fine because I got home and I was like, I don't think I actually have room for this. So I was very glad it went to you.
So I have a ton of overflow of books.
And you recently won a bookshelf.
And I recently won a bookshelf.
Which clearly is an enabling act.
Right. But because my thought was, this will hold all of my overflow, first mistake, and leave room to spare. Dream, just like an absolute dream, thing that is not real, never real. So over the past weekend, I finally put the bookshelf where it was going to go. I start loading the books into it. And the bookshelf is kind of divided into 2 shelves with like separation between like rectangular chunks. I'm trying to like paint a vision of this. And it's quite long. And I got to the second portion of the top shelf and I realized there is not enough room to hold overflow. And the notion that there would be more room left over was hubris. And this was the gods punishing me for having the audacity to think that there would ever be more room. And I called my mom crying because I was just like, why did you raise me to be this way? And her response was, do you want me to send you more books? So when she listens to this, I just want her to know that her enabling behavior has now been immortalized in this podcast.
Which is where we open up, and we are all employed in a library and work in a library every day. We're surrounded by books. So one might wonder, does one stop buying physical books when they know that they can have access to so many books? And the answer is, in Roddy's case, no. I'm guessing probably sort of no in Mary Grahame's case as well.
Also no.
Also no. Okay.
But it has changed.
Okay.
So before I worked here, it was still a pandemic because that's how long the pandemic has been happening. Right. And I had a job that, gave me a little extra cash for the book purchasing. And because I actually live quite close to my local branch library, but for various reasons, it wasn't open for browsing, and
sure.
I like looking at shelves. I don't really like browsing through the catalog, so I was just ordering a lot of my books from my local indie bookstore, and they were showing up at my apartment. It was great. And then when I got my job here, I was thrilled, and I was like, yay, I'm working at the free book place again. And I actually do. It is harder for me to justify spending money on, especially a book I'm not certain I will like. Mm-hmm. So I have certain authors, like automatic buy. Sure. I will pre-order their stuff, like they're getting my money. It's
we'll
not a question.
Return to that later, Roddy.
yeah, it's not a question.
That's coming up.
But recently, actually, over the holiday break, I went to a Barnes & Noble that was going out of business, and so everything was 50% off. And it was still so hard to make myself, I made out like a bandit from that. Sure. But it was so hard because I have not a very big apartment. I have 4 bookshelves. They're all full. And I'm going to have to start operating on the one in, one out system. And it's just, I don't have that much overflow room. Like, my overflow room blocks my television. And so it's a struggle.
There's a song. Most people will be familiar with this song because the Fugees covered it in the 90s, but the original version is by Roberta Flack, and it's called Killing Me Softly. And that's what I feel right now in this conversation. It's just playing in the back of my mind because that is my life.
Quick transition here. Sylvia Moreno Garcia.
Listen. If I have money in my pocket and she walks past me, I will just hand it to her. That's how much I love her and her books.
Read Gods of Jade and Shadow.
You finished it?
I finished it. I read it over. So I actually picked it up on this same trip, not from the Barnes & Noble, but from the person who was accompanying me to the Barnes & Noble, because he has twice as many books as I do, and sometimes I take a look at books on his shelves and I say, well, so you can get that back in a month when I'm back. And so I will borrow his books. And how does she do it, Roddy?
Okay, so Jeff brought her up.
Author of Mexican Gothic, as well as
Velvet Was the Night.
Yes, Velvet Was the Night, Gods of Jade and Shadow. She also had I think it's called Certain Dark Things that just came out. One of my favorite authors.
Does she have anything new coming out?
Yes. And yesterday, and this is why this is being brought up, she announced that she has yet another book coming out because her pen does not stop. And it is a retelling in a sense of, let me try to pull this up super duper quickly. Sorry, everyone.
That's okay.
Yes, it is called The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which is a retelling of Dr. Moreau's Island? Yeah, wow. The Island of Dr. Moreau. So she is doing a retelling of that. It comes out in July. This just turned into a book plug because I told Jeff I want to pre-order it because I know I love her. And everything that she produces is something that I have vastly enjoyed. And just to put that out there, because not pre-ordering it is going to be hard. And in the course of 24 hours, I've decided to give up my inclination to try to wait because I'm just going to pre-order it. So, but I was just going to say, so my background is that before I worked here, I worked at a bookstore. And working there was bad for me in terms of not buying a bunch of books. Because when I moved to this state from California, I actually went through all of my books in my tiny room at home, and there were hundreds, and I brought approximately 50 with me. And I was just like, these are going to be my books. And then I started working at the bookstore, and I got a thing called an employee discount, which was increased while I was working at the bookstore.
Oh, no.
From 30% to 40%.
No.
They knew what they were doing.
They did.
Criminals. So they got all of my money, and it was fine. Not as fine for my fiance, because he was just like, there are books in every room of this house. And I was just like, welcome to the next 50 years of your life. So
It's good that he knows this now.
yeah, like, hello.
Yeah.
Look at who you're talking to. But the funny thing is, when I was a child and we couldn't afford to buy books all the time, I spent a lot of time in libraries when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. And like books were a Christmas and a birthday thing, and like sometimes a report card thing because I had good grades. So I was just like, buy me books.
What is it with with like the parents and the report card books? Talk about other people who know what they're doing.
Right.
Because so I grew up around the corner from the Jefferson branch of the Detroit Public Library, and like I went sometimes, but I'm a little shocked at how often I didn't go, considering it was right there. And I think part of it was I got like report card books, and there was a library at my school, so I took a lot of stuff out of the school library. And then like also I lived very close to a Barnes and Noble, so it was a treat, or like if I like saved my allowance or something like that. But I buy so few books now that when I do go in to bookstores, and hardcovers especially, I'm like, this is astronomical.
Yeah, they got me with that 50% off sale too, because they were doing that all over the country. Yes. And I walked into my old store and I was just like, hello, old coworkers. I am here specifically to buy books.
Yeah.
And then it was so bad. I regret this, not entirely, but there were a couple of books that we could not find at my old Barnes and Noble. So I pulled up my phone, went to the website, and pulled up the books on the Barnes & Noble I used to go to back home with my mother in Los Angeles. Found out that they had both of the books. I put them on hold under my mom's name, and she picked them up for me and then mailed them to me. It was outrageous. I know that I wish I had some sort of excuse for myself, but I don't. So I have to recognize that there are worse things I could do with my time. Right. So the fact that I just buy books, and I'm really excited about both of them.
Sure.
One of them is Helm of Midnight, which is a fantasy book. The other is The Bright Ages, which
I love that book.
It's
so
read it?
good.
Okay,
yes.
So see, no regrets.
No regrets. Do not regret that choice in the slightest. I use Libro FM for my audiobooks. Dear listeners, if you, like I once was, are looking to divest yourselves from Amazon, may I recommend Libro FM, which allows you to support your local bookstore through audiobooks. So the bookstore that is closest to my residence is Source Booksellers in Midtown Detroit, which is a wonderful, wonderful place run by wonderful people. But their niche is nonfiction, and I mostly read fiction. And so the way that I support them on the regular is that I've connected my Libro FM account to them, and I can buy fiction audiobooks, and some of the money still goes to Source, which is fantastic.
Beautiful.
But sometimes I also read nonfiction on audio, and so I used one of my Libro FM credits to get The Bright Ages, and I mostly focused on medieval literature in my English degree in college, and
I'm so excited.
The excited laps that I did around my apartment as I was listening to that book, I'm so excited for you.
Thank you for telling me about this new bookstore to go visit because I love indie bookstores, and also since I guess this is also an ad for our favorite places to buy books that aren't Amazon.
Yes.
Bookshop.org
Yes.
is also fantastic for connecting to your local bookstore.
If your
and
local
ordering
bookstore does not
books.
have its own
Yes.
website ordering system,
Right. Which,
look for them on Bookshop.
you know, all of my favorite bookstores, like indie-owned bookstores, do. Like the Rip Bodice back home, which during the pandemic, they started something called care packages where they would fill books. Like you could tell them specific books, or you could just give them a vague idea of what you wanted, and they would send you books. And I did that about 7 times. I'm exaggerating, but I might not also be knowing me at this point.
And you can add like tea, right?
Yes, you could add tea. I got a robe,
Oh my
candles.
gosh.
Yes.
It was fantastic.
I love book life.
It,
Life.
it was
That's
just,
just book life.
it was beautiful and
Yes.
never regret it.
That's
Also,
good.
their teas are called trope tea, and they name them after tropes.
Like only one bed.
Yes,
Yeah.
only one bed. And I think,
Kissing for science.
yeah, and also like siblings best friend
Mhm.
trope. Anyway, I kept buying the Earl Grey one, which I thought was only one bed for a minute, but I think they switched it. Anyway, it was great. Don't regret it. That got me through the time I spent at home. So,
The
there-
Bright Ages: A New History of Medieval Europe
So
by
good.
David M. Perry and Matthew Gabriel, and the cover alone looks like it could be a frameable poster with the calligraphy
yes.
on it.
Also, we have it here at the library. I
great.
just checked it in the
We
other
have it
day.
here at the library.
Yes, we do.
I could get it for free.
Almost all of the books that I've named, we have here. I've also checked them in within the past few days because the way my life is set up is that the universe likes to remind me
Right.
of the things that I do
Right.
as quickly as it possibly can.
Right. As you've been going through this story of looking for books on this sale, contacting your mom for the books you could not find, and going this extra mile so that you could own these books, Mary Grahame and I are over here with sympathetic eyes, but we're grinning too, because it's like this mixture of we love it too. We love this about you,
But yeah,
despite how I don't know how you
Well,
feel about it.
I mean, like, I know I haven't gone on this particular odyssey yet, but I'm about to embark on it, and I'll like report back the next time we do a podcast, I guess.
Sure.
2021 was my year of reading the Peter Wimsey novels by Dorothy L. Sayers, and I got them digitally from the library. Fun fact, dear listeners, your library also probably has
No doubt.
a ton of audiobooks and ebooks for free. So even if you don't get that Libro FM subscription, or if you decide that's not enough,
Right.
supplement
Absolutely.
with your local library's offerings. So all of the Peter Wimsey books were available in ebook. And so this is another thing that I do like about this is like my borrow versus buy pattern, is that I will read things and then go, I have to have that. I have to like
Yes.
have that in my hot little hands. I have to be able to underline it.
Sure.
Like that kind of thing. And so I've decided I'm going to acquire all of the Peter Wimsey novels. There's like 9 of them. The problem is that the American covers are ugly as sin.
Oh, boy.
And so
why did they always do this? Our covers are always terrible. It's so upsetting.
it's
Sorry.
because I don't know, it's petty payback or something.
I mean, we deserve it, but still.
That's not false. But but the British covers for the Peter Wimsey books are just gorgeous. And so I was talking to a friend who is stateside who was like, eBay is your friend, like because she also read the Wimsey books and completely separately from me was like, oh, I want to own these, and these covers are so ugly. What can I do about that? And so I will be shortly going the extra mile to try to get British editions here without paying an arm and a leg for them.
Are these the British
So-
or American?
Those are the ebook only, because I like those.
Interesting.
Okay.
And I tried to see if they exist in paper,
We'll have an image in the show notes.
and they don't.
Okay.
So yeah, I can't remember the British publisher, but I looked up the covers and I was like, oh, those are so much better. But yeah,
Dorothy L. Sayers.
Yeah.
Dorothy L.
Making an
Sayers,
appearance on the
man.
podcast. Deep cuts.
You could have me back just
Sure.
an hour. You say go, and I start talking about Dorothy Sayers. I black out, and then an hour later we're done with the podcast. Like,
I could follow you up on that. I'm also going to follow you up on the Music Man too.
yes.
I feel
So
like
my other sort of favorite indie bookstore is also, yes, the Rip Bodice. It's where I order all of my romance novels from. Huge fan of Brookline Booksmith. I went to library school in Boston. I basically lived at the Booksmith, run by fantastic people.
Sure.
Just amazing stuff. I went to author events there. Just like one of those great bookshops that is a community hub on top of everything else.
Right
Literati in Ann Arbor is my sort of like my usual local. The very lovely people that I worked with at the Newton Free Library in Massachusetts when they were giving me a graduation gift when I finished school, gave me a gift card. They like months in advance, I had no idea what they were doing. We're like, so where do you like to shop for your books when you're at home? And I was like, oh, it's this place. It's, 45 minutes away. It's fine. And then 3 months later, they were like, behold a gift card.
When you're ready to go for a ride.
Yeah.
To Literati with me.
Yeah.
Let me know.
Yeah.
Just me and you.
Yep.
Down that
it's gonna be
lonely road.
So dangerous for our wallets. And I mean, I remember very clearly the first time that I went into Literati with a friend who was like, I can't believe you've never been before. And just because I didn't spend much time in Ann Arbor. And I have a personal policy that when I go to an indie bookshop for the first time, it's just good manners to buy one book.
Yes.
Like, so I give myself that permission to be like, none of this like, oh, I'll just take a look and I'm not going to buy anything. Like, no, it's manners. I was up in Petoskey a couple of years ago. There's a great bookshop up there. I was like, oh, get to go treat myself to a book because that's just being polite.
Right. I'm just doing this to be polite, not just to be polite.
Sure.
But I think when I think about my own borrow versus buying habits, because I do buy many fewer books now that I work at a library, because it's hard for me to justify like, well, I could get that at work. I could get it for free, which is not a trivial consideration. Because books are expensive.
Exactly.
But when I think sometimes publishers whine about like, oh, libraries are going to put a dent in our sales or whatever. First of all, who do you think buys your books? Like, how do you think we get them?
Right.
Exactly.
We pay for them.
Right.
If they happen to be ebooks, you extort us for them.
Exactly.
And like, I test run things. I read Katherine Arden's Winter Night Trilogy, entirely getting it from ebook from the library. I have now bought the whole trilogy for myself. It is beautiful. It's on my bookshelf. It's so pretty. I have bought the first book for at least 2 people as gifts.
Great.
Like, take all of my money, Katherine Arden's publisher.
It's a test drive.
So, congratulations, because I got to read that book for free, in a way where the author's rights were respected, it was paid for, not pirated, nothing like that. Like, now I keep buying it over and over again.
That's great.
Right. And I find that it's way easier for me to borrow fiction than nonfiction.
Yeah.
So, and I don't read as much nonfiction, even though I would like to sometimes. Because, sometimes you just need to escape.
Sure.
So it's way easier for me to just go borrow a fiction book really quick, read it, and then turn around and go, I need to buy this book, which happens way more often than would be healthy.
Well, fiction is such a different experience than nonfiction.
And then for nonfiction, the thing is, I love to annotate.
Sure.
I take notes like no one's business. So, with library books, you don't want to disrespect the book in the library by writing in it. Even if you do it with pencil, it doesn't erase clean most of the time. Like, it's a respect thing. So for me, it's way easier for me to go, okay, there's this nonfiction book. Let me try to read it with the library. And if I'm getting into the groove of it, then I would like to own it.
Sure.
Or I'll see if I'll like to own it.
Sure.
For example, The Black Count, the biography of Alexander Dumas's father, the elder Alexander Dumas. Like, it was a fantastic book. I still haven't bought it yet, but I know that I'll want to buy it and reread it and then take lots of notes that are all going to be somewhere along the lines of this dude is so hot. Over and over and over.
I've only read like the first couple of chapters of that book before I had to give it back to the library, and you're so right.
I was just like, oh my God, I have such a huge crush on this man who's been dead for hundreds of years, but he is literally so cool.
You have very good reasons.
If you read it, you would also have a crush on him by the end of the book.
I can only imagine. As we've established, I was a fan of Dumas' books, a fan of the whole Musketeer swashbuckling energy.
Who he based most of his characters off of.
That's amazing.
His super hot dad.
That's amazing.
So just think about that.
Oh yeah.
Next time.
So his dad is easily a stand-in for probably Athos and the Count.
Oh, easily. So, yeah.
I also find when I borrow books from the library, the interesting thing is you might think, oh, you have 3 weeks to read it. Surely, Mary Grahame, that will help you actually finish the books that you borrow. Alas, you would be incorrect. In part because we have automatic renewals here in Ferndale. And so
More
if no one
enabling.
else wants it, I've accidentally kept it for like 9 weeks. And also because there is both no financial risk and like if I get it back, I can always get it again.
Right.
On the one hand, I find it very freeing because I'm someone who I will read more if I don't have this preset list.
Yes.
You know, if I can pick things up and put them down. And I have a fairly good memory. Like within a year, I could pick a book back up and not have to start it over.
Right.
And so there's just something very freeing for me about like, I've got this huge stack of books. If I don't get to all of them, it literally doesn't matter. My apartment is small and they will be out of my apartment one way or another, whether I read them or not at some point. And so there's also the stress of like, now when I buy new books, because all my bookshelves are full, I'm like, where will it go?
Right.
Yeah, and I also have the problem where I'm not that good at reading ebooks, and audiobooks are... So, to be clear, I've learned since working at the library, because I have access to them for free, if I want to reread a book, an audiobook is perfect for me.
Sure.
Or
Love
if
rereading
there's
via audio.
a book that I've started reading and I wasn't able to get into, I will use the audiobook to see if I can get into the book, and if it works, then I will finish the physical book, which I own. So that access is great for me. I'm good at reading ebooks of romance novels, not of very much else.
Yeah. Right.
Same.
Because romance novels tend to be very quick reads for me in general. Fiction in general is quick read, but like for romance, it just kind of like the pages just fly by.
And there's something about romance, not to make this Rodi and Mary Grahame talk about romance part 2, although
I know it's a running gag. Not a gag, but
is that because I mostly read, like, my Kobo is 95% romance novels,
Right.
and a lot of my sort of like automatic buy authors, those are ebooks. Like I set those on pre-order, and the newest Cat Sebastian shows up the day it comes out. There's something, and I mean this in a positive way, ephemeral about I think a lot of sort of like popular literature, no matter, you know, if you're thinking about ballads or pamphlets or like the early 3-volume novel or something.
Sure.
There is this sort of, because I once had someone say to me, well, I have no connection to an ebook as a physical, you know, the book as object. And I totally see where he was coming from. And certainly with romance, I don't care.
Right.
And I sort of feel similarly about mass market paperbacks, which I adore. It's not the beauty of the format. It is not the reason I love that format. So
Yeah.
but also I can't read nonfiction on ebook.
Yeah, I can't. And I don't care about the aesthetics of most of the books that I read too. So I'm not, and I say that to the extent that, like, if I see a book that's objectively beautiful, there have been times where I've been like, look at this book cover, oh my God. Yes. But when I'm reading a book, I don't care that the pages are serrated. I don't care that there's like gold paint all
or
over
that
the
there's
place.
a secret design under the book
Right.
jacket.
Yeah.
Like, that's cool to look at,
Sure.
but I care about the book and the words
Right.
that make up the story themselves rather than the book itself.
Do you dog your pages?
I used to. Now I do the, I guess, chaotic evil thing of just memorizing what page I leave off on.
Which
in
is what I
books.
do.
So I
Fascinating.
used to dog ear when I was younger, though. But now I'll just be like, oh, okay, I'm on page like 96.
See, I did not used to be a dog ear person, and I try not to do it with library books because of the whole like respecting a shared object
Right.
sort of deal. But my own stuff now, I dog ear all the time, in part because I don't know where any of my bookmarks have gone. Like they're all floating around in various books. Or actually, what I use more than anything else, the receipt from the library.
Yes. If I have the receipt for the library, I will use that. But like my go-to is just to go, this is the page that I left off on.
Dang.
Which is, I've learned, apparently odd according to that like D&D style. Did you see that meme by any chance?
No,
Someone
not yet.
did a like, I'll try to find it for you. Someone did a meme of like all the different ways that people
The alignment
mark
chart.
off. Yeah, an alignment chart of like how people like memorize their places in
Oh,
books.
I did say that, where it's the chaotic neutral or
Yeah,
what have you.
I
Yeah.
think
the personality
I
test.
think memorizing is chaotic neutral, but like I like villains, so like my inclination is to like try to be evil, but not really.
Sure.
That is so confusing for people who don't know me. Sorry, listeners. You will understand one day soon
When we do our villain episode.
when we do the villain episode.
To come back to why we own books and aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I was 7th grade maybe when I had my not momentary obsession with Three Musketeers, and Alexander Dumas was one of my favorite books as a kid. The book that I wound up owning, the one that's in my library, is admittedly a rather horrendous looking copy. It's actually the library's original copy, published in like 1948, and it's blue. It's this ugly blue cover, and it's kind of faded, and the animation looks the painted illustrated musketeers on the front, and it just looks awkward. But I hold that book, and I love that book, and my heart glows when I open it and read it, because that's the book that matters to me. So that's what's at my house right now. So I stole that from the library. I also stole its card catalog, so I'll admit that. Here, listen, I'll share my little book background, because I've worked in libraries since I was 14.
Mm-hmm.
So I've never been a book buyer, really ever, except for this frenzy era in college. Because you're just full of idealism and energy, and the world is yours, and you just want to buy all these books, and you want to just sit around and drink coffee and read books. That's just what you do. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I have 3 bookshelves in my house. They're all full, and I think the total is up to only 200, and I have 200 books in my house. Mm-hmm. And I haven't really bought books since that frenzy between 18 and 22 when I was in college.
I respect that.
They are organized by fiction and nonfiction. There's one shelf that's entirely fiction. There's one shelf that's entirely, I think I already misspoke, one fiction, one nonfiction. And then there's a shelf in the basement that is completely chaos. And I just, they're just books that I think I want to own. And I've read most of them, but I really haven't been adding to it. Now they are just not decorations, not furniture, but something in between. So I really feel like we are the bowls of porridge here. Roddy's the almost too hot bowl of porridge, buying too much. And then Mary Graham's just right, and I'm too cold over here. I'm not buying enough books. Because even from childhood, my parents took me to the library every single week, and every book I read was from the library. So I'm just library through and through.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you brought up aesthetics, because first of all, I like completely understand the attachment to like the beat up copy of The Beloved.
Because that's the one I read first.
Exactly. So
yeah.
I read Les Miserables in an English translation my freshman year of high school, and it only like shaped my personality permanently. It's no big deal. And the only reason that I no longer have, and it was like a beat up copy from a used book sale, because I grew up going to the St. Clair of Montefalco annual used book sale every year, and you can just allow yourself to go absolutely wild. Sure. Because like used, they're cheap. Mm-hmm. They're like 50 cents. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I don't have it anymore is I did more research and realized it's kind of an atrocious translation. Like everybody sort of universally hates this particular, the Denny translation. And so that was the moment where I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to learn French just so that I can read what Victor Hugo actually wrote, which then I did. But then also I was like, I have to acquire other translations now. But it took me a long time before I like actually got rid of that book, and it wasn't on aesthetic grounds. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, you look at a paperback edition of Les Miserables and you understand like why fans call it the brick. Mm-hmm. Like it is the size and shape of a brick. Right. And I think it's interesting. I wouldn't say I spend, a lot of time on like bookish Instagram or like, book social media or anything. And the only TikTok interaction I have is the very excellent content we make here at the library. Yes. But I think it's interesting that there's a lot of focus on the aesthetics of like books and book hauls. Yes,
absolutely.
But they have to be new. It's never like, look what I brought home from the library that's covered in contact paper.
Right.
But I think that that's great. And I mean, I think libraries are one of the great like social community sharing successes.
I agree.
That we currently have.
I wanted to inevitably bring up TikTok, because a lot of libraries are active on TikTok, and a lot of Barnes and Noble chains are active on TikTok and you see Barnes & Noble people creating great content and doing what they're doing. And you'll see libraries, if I could just generalize, a lot of their vibe is, and I mean this in the best way because, we're awesome, but they're like, hey, you don't have to spend so much money on your books. You can come get them for free. And a lot of libraries on TikTok will do flashy ways of saying, look at all this, and it's free.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of book talkers out there in book talk. TOK, I'm not saying book talk. And their generalized meme is, I just got paid and I'm going to spend it all on books. And it's sort of this proud thing. And it is always all the new stuff.
And
yes, I have hot takes.
Hot takes.
I have hot takes. So, this is my issue with book talk because I do participate in it to a very small extent. That was a hard sentence for some reason. A lot of it frustrates me because while book talk has been great for sort of promoting authors who were kind of flying under the radar, repetitiveness is its biggest problem.
Sure.
It is always the same books over and over and over again. And that also has a lot to do with the fact that, in my opinion, a lot of book talkers kind of skew younger. So I found that, it was usually the same YA books that were being promoted over and over again, right, or the same romance books where they were like, this is so spicy, and it wasn't.
Right.
And it was just a lot of the same things over and over and over again. Whereas me personally, I read just about everything. So the things that I was talking about and doing weren't necessarily about what's new. Was just like, right, hey, these books for this genre or right, these books for this genre. Right. Also, a lot of those book talkers use libraries and probably won't actually say it out loud. Some of them do. They'll say like, oh yeah, no, I live by this library and I just go here. But the engagement tends to be about, oh, look at these new books. Look at these new things that are coming out, where bookstores like Barnes & Noble can say, well, here's our shipment of all of the new books that came out this Tuesday. Let's go crazy. But the thing that frustrates me is that there are so many books that don't get the super big Tuesday releases where you get 200 copies of it into the store.
Right. With all the buzz. And promotion that doesn't have to come from you. Like the amount of unpaid labor that is expected from authors right now, particularly mid-list, like when it's not your debut. And there's something so materialistic about the whole like new book haul sort of deal. And
working in a bookstore on Tuesday mornings, that was absolute not fun. I was going to use another word, but
I mean, listeners, if you don't know, like basically every book comes out on Tuesday. Yes. If you are not James Patterson,
and you can't, for a lot of these books, there's something called strict on sale at the bookstore. I don't know if the library uses the same term because
something similar.
Yeah, which means that they cannot be put out. The physical copies have to remain in the back until the release day. So that
like
usually means
Marvel secret
yes,
stuff.
Exactly.
And like as a young person, I didn't understand that. Of course, you have the physical books before the release day. Right. I was like, do they get dropped off early in the morning? Like,
no. Like what'll happen is they'll get delivered weeks in advance usually, and they just sit there until it's time to put them out. And then the morning of the book release, everyone who opens the bookstore scrambling around to make sure that all of the new Tuesday books are out and have their time in the light. And, some of them release already as bestsellers, which is, anyway.
Also, the emphasis placed right now on pre-orders.
Yes.
Particularly for debuts, but just at all. And the idea of pre-orders making or breaking how successful a book is drives me absolutely bonkers. Right. Because, like, first of all, one of the things that I love about libraries is that it doesn't, as long as the book has come out, you can discover it at any time. I mean, I think about the other series that dominated my reading year in 2021, aside from Peter Wimsey, was the Queen's Thief series. The first novel in the Queen's Thief series came out 20 years ago. And I have no idea how it was never placed in my hands because I loved it as a grown person, and I also would have loved it as a middle schooler.
Sure.
Also, the likeliness that you would find that in a bookstore is actually significantly low because bookstores will stop carrying certain books unless, they're the usual ones that everyone has to read for school.
Right.
Or like it's just a book that is just so pervasive. I mean, for example, historical texts. You're going to see the Federalist Papers in a bookstore today.
Right.
They're going to have a new intro by some historian you've probably never heard of and a really long, like, outro. I don't know. There's specific
And
terms.
they'll probably have Pride and Prejudice.
Yes.
But
something that came out, like you said, 20 years ago, that might have been mid-list at the time, doesn't matter. But it also sucks because a lot of these new authors, especially debut authors, those pre-orders are really important for them too. It's a problem with the system
For
overall.
Sure.
And so
the longer I work in libraries, the more I'm like, I think publishing is kind of sus, actually.
Yes, and I don't
is.
want to say that book talk is a lie, but just the thing about content creation is that it's literally in the name. It's to create content. It's to get people's attention and things like that, but it doesn't necessarily portray an accurate view of what's going on. And I feel like personally, and once again, this is probably me being an older millennial. I think
you're either the youngest millennial ever or you're the eldest Gen Z ever.
I
think that's the cutoff.
hit the cutoff.
Yep.
Fortunately,
so did I. I am the very young, and like I knew that I had become an old when TikTok started because I was working in a library and the teens would come in and talk about it, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about, and also I don't want to. I'm happy for you to tell me, but like I'm not going to investigate what TikTok is.
Wish you all the best on your journey.
Exactly. And so that's how I definitely consider myself like the end of the millennials.
Yeah, it's the revival of dances from my youth.
Right.
And clothing from my youth where I'm just like, well, dang, I guess I am old now. Right? And I'm glad that I am because you children have no idea what you're doing. That's not how that dance goes. Sorry.
And neither did we, to be honest.
But we look better doing it.
That is true because we grew up in once we hit a certain age, high-waisted pants.
Yeah.
Here's what's fascinating is that when I was an innocent beginning TikToker just wandering my way into this confusing and exciting and scary sometimes hellscape is that I saw when I first encountered a book talker in the wild, I saw what appeared to be likely some 22 or 23-year-old glorifying books and glorifying buying books, and I said, wow, that seems positive.
Yes. No,
that is a good sign. But
it is a good thing.
Yeah.
To an extent.
That they love books. They're obsessed. Wait, kids like books?
But
Forgive me, everybody. I'm like 55, so.
Oh, you were 53 2 weeks ago, Jeff. What's happening?
I know. I'm just getting older by the week.
Aren't we all?
I also wonder the difference between sort of like internet book culture and like reading.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I look at my books and I think, dang, I gotta read you guys now. Because I think that buying books and getting excited about books is like one pastime, and I don't think that it's a bad pastime, and I think reading is also a related but different pastime.
Yeah. And I also, if you and everyone around you are reading the same books over and over again, and you're all talking about the same books over and over again,
where does it go?
Yeah. And I listen, because I obviously will buy just about anything, but I also have this thing known as contrariness, where if I see too many people talking about a book, I will, not because I don't think the book is actually good, but it makes me less inclined to want to read it. I don't know why. Or it makes me want to wait to read it too, because I'm just like, I'm getting overwhelmed with the amount of information that I'm getting about this thing where I almost feel like I don't need to read this book at this point.
Well, you're too conscious of everyone else's experience of it.
Yes.
You don't want it to cloud your own.
And that's the beauty of a library, where you can just walk in and go find something that you won't be overwhelmed with information about. And you can make a discovery far easier than you can in a bookstore.
Sure.
And I think that that's something that I never took for granted about libraries too. Like I've always, because I used to go to one all the time when I was a kid, but buying books was kind of like, what's the word, an experience, a privilege, something exciting. And then in college, I went to a college where we all use primary text. So we didn't really, like outside of like a few manuals and stuff like that, we didn't have textbooks. So everything that I read in school was the original text, which made me far more inclined to actually buy the books. And then whatever I couldn't afford, I would go to the school library and then borrow it.
Sure.
So rebuilding my library after high school, because I used the school library at high school too. So I actually didn't own that many books before college. It was kind of like an experience of like, ooh, I'm reading all of these older texts,
Right.
and I'm getting to like rediscover their air quotes for the listeners, all these texts that I haven't before. Let me see what I can keep doing with that. And while that was good in college, I left and I was just like, I don't even know how to buy books anymore. I don't know how to read for enjoyment anymore. I don't know what I'm doing. And so buying books once again kind of like cured that for me. Once again, air quotes.
Sure.
And then now I work at a library and I'm like, well, I can discover things again and like take my time and not be overwhelmed with $28 hardcovers.
Yeah, also I want people to follow the library on social media. However, PSA, social media, and especially TikTok, is not where you go to find out who you are or to learn more about yourself. And if you are watching Book Talkers, it does feel sometimes identical to just watching an influencer. And if the influencer is telling you to wear the cool sunglasses or read the popular book, that book might not be for you. If you go to a library, you can walk up to a desk and talk to a human, and that human will ask you questions about what you like, and they will go to the shelves and find a book that might be 19 years old, but you're going to love it.
And even if you hate it, because this is something that when I'm doing like reader's advisory with kids, I especially like to let them know, is I'm like, you don't have to like something just because I'm a grown up and I hand it to you.
That's beautiful.
And I also say, like, you know, if I hand you anything and you're like, no, this doesn't really look interesting, tell me, because like that also helps me, like finding out what you don't like helps me figure out what you do like. I like also, if you take something home and you read it and you hate it, you can come back and say, hey, Miss Mary Grahame, I hated this, which is also helpful.
Right.
And you're also allowed to decide
Right.
what you don't like. Rodi, I have a question for you, since you've worked both in libraries and in bookstores. I don't know how much like hand selling you did and how much direct recommendation you do with patrons, but do you feel like there's a difference in that, you know, we're not trying to sell you anything at the library?
Yeah. So when I talked about reader's advisory with Jeff and Sarah, I actually talked about how the emphasis was always on like selling books to us, like get books out the door.
Right.
And once again, for me, it wasn't too hard to do that because I read over a wide span of genres. However, it wasn't always a matter of, do I think you're really going to like this, or am I trying to sell this book that you might like? And the beautiful thing about libraries is that if you don't like a book, you'll just bring it back. But, you know, at a bookstore, it is a monetary commitment. Yes, you can return it, but like you find the impetus to get up and go get your money back is way harder sometimes, especially if you're like a person with a job. And I just here, while I don't get to do as much direct recommendations for patrons, I do get to do a lot of like indirect, through which Sarah told me about this. I'm really excited to find out what I do through like my staff pick or the displays that I put up, where it's just like, oh, here are these books that you might like if you like this sort of thing. So.
And everybody, Rodi's displays are amazing, and they always have really good titles. So, like, she put up one before the holidays entitled "Are You Not Entertained?" that is about like home entertaining and cookbooks and things like that, and that's just the tip of the very excellent iceberg. So, if you're in the area, stop by and see the displays. But like, I love the staff picks.
Yes.
I love, and it feels so good when someone when like you walk by and your staff pick is empty.
Yeah,
because someone's taken what you recommended, and I love seeing what my coworkers are like reading or watching, because we do DVD recommendations too. And I mean, right now, I Reader's Advisory is always the highlight of my day. Like whenever people come up to the desk, whether it's kids or they're grown-ups or whatever. And because, you know, we're definitely still not back to pre-pandemic levels of foot traffic, even though I am sitting at a desk, you know, trying to get the public to notice me for a large portion of the day, we just don't get as much as we used to.
Right.
But so all of that to say that, like, your library is good for many, many, many things.
Yes.
And one of those things is an algorithm is not going to recommend books to you. A person is.
No,
Yes.
exactly.
Also, just gonna like put this little PSA out there for all the libraries that do social media stuff. Please promote books that aren't just new more often, because while that's exciting, there's so many books that libraries have or have access to that people won't be able to find out in the wild when they're being overwhelmed by, you know, 200 copies of the same James Patterson book. No offense. Once they walk into a bookstore, they're not going to see the other books. They're going to just see what's right in front of them.
There.
Yeah.
Like I think about one of my favorite books for young people is called The Perilous Guard by Elizabeth Marie Pope. And actually my copy is a sort of decommissioned copy from the Detroit Public Library. And it's just sort of like classic old book. Like there's a particular typeface used in like the 60s. And the person who gave me this book was a librarian at the Detroit Public Library, and she was weeding the children's section and was like, well, this hasn't circulated in ages, so we'll pull it, but I know someone who might like this. And the only place I have ever seen that book since is in other public libraries. And I recommend it all the time. I've never seen it in a bookstore. You would have to order it special. I have seen it on the shelf in other public libraries.
So please promote the hidden gems
Sure.
in your library.
Sure.
Even if you don't know if they're hidden gems, just show people that they exist.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
So-
That gets into how libraries possibly unconsciously think that they are in some unacknowledged competition with bookstores. So every Tuesday we get new books, just like bookstores get new books. And I guess what's going on is this tacit sort of, why go there when you can come here kind of a thing every Tuesday. But I am glad every Thursday on social media we share themed lists, not new lists.
Yes.
And the themed lists dip back into the old stuff. So that is always fun to do. But I think if we have any closing thoughts, it's also support your independent bookstore.
Support your
yeah.
independent bookstores. I know that people use Amazon for various reasons, including convenience and affordability, and I get it. And I stopped using Amazon and never looked back. And so it is possible. I believe in you. If that's something you want to do, consider this sort of your spur to do that. And helping indie bookstores not only, you know, is like local small business, keeping your money close to home, but also like often sort of community centers. Often there's author talks or book signings or things like that, which is just such a delight if that is something that is near you. Or, I mean, the joy of the United States Postal Service. You know, I order from bookstores that I don't live anywhere close to.
Right.
Someday I will do a pilgrimage to the Ripped Bodice, but even though I haven't been yet, they have still had my money, you know?
It's beautiful.
And I think that there is value in thinking about how libraries and bookstores can work together in our own reading lives. I mean, like I said, I'm a big fan of the whole, like, local library test drive model.
Exactly.
But I feel so much less pressure when I walk into a library.
Yes.
And so come visit us.
I'll second that. I said I stopped buying books after I was 22. I have bought at least 6 or 7. Not a lot, but I have bought 6 or 7. Every single one of those 7 were test drove in a library, and I loved them, and I bought them.
Isn't it beautiful?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was our chat about books. Thank you both for being here once again.
Of course, it was great.
How do you feel, Rodi? How do you feel better? Do you feel less exasperated? Do you feel any kind of resolution? Do you feel you're gonna go order that Silvia Moreno Garcia book? Yes.
Most likely. But I will say that to an extent, working here has tempered my book buying a lot. So there has been some improvement. It's very light improvement, but it's there. It's slow, small baby steps towards actualization.
I think I don't want to speak generally, but I think we're excited about people finding the right books for them and the books that they love and the joy that those books can bring them, and that we're not militant about saying it has to be from the library, get the library card, get all your books for free. Where I love that Mary Grahame was talking about that we got to find this coexistence, this harmony with bookstores. Yeah,
For sure.
so that is another chat with Rodi and Mary Grahame about books. I'm so glad to always have you here. We'll have you back again. Probably going to explore a few ideas that organically came up in this episode, future topics. Thanks so much for tuning in to A Little Too Quiet, the Ferndale Library podcast. It's brought to you by the Friends of the Ferndale Library. The music that you hear at the beginning and the end of each episode is by local musician John Duffy. And if you want to support this podcast, you can go to ferndalefriends.org. You could also follow us or leave a comment, maybe leave a starred review, or just tell your friends about us. And if you have friends out there who are in similar situations where they love to buy books and they're trying to figure out what to do with their bookshelves at home and they can commiserate with what we just talked about, share this episode to social media so maybe they can check it out too. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week with more.